Another day, another scandal, or so it seems. Red Bull look to have gotten into trouble for real this time, and the other team bosses are adamant to make them pay, even if it will cost Red Bull and Max Verstappen the championship. Watch the video and find out how the other team bosses lashed out at Red Bull and their overspending. The topic of conversation on the Friday night in Singapore was quite important. According to sources in the F1 paddock, Aston Martin and Red Bull have exceeded the 2021 budget cap, which was implemented for the first time in 2021. The FIA made a brief statement admitting the rumours, but the real test for the organisation will come this Wednesday, when the regulatory body will reveal its conclusions regarding any minor or significant violations of the cost cap, and then decide how it will impose the appropriate sanctions. To give Hamilton 8 championships and reopen the Abu Dhabi box of worms, the press spuriously ran with the notion that Verstappen would lose his first world title. That is almost certainly not going to occur. But if the FIA discovers any team over the $145 million cap at the first attempt, it must set a precedent. In criticising Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari have united, despite their ideological opposition to the FIA's proposed strategy to stop porpoising. Toto Wolff, the boss of the Silver Arrows, believes that any team that exceeded the cap will benefit not only in 2021, but also in 2022 and 2023, since it improved their ability to adjust to the significant regulatory change. Expect plenty of slurs to be thrown, regardless of whether Red Bull loses second place in the 2021 Constructors' Championship or has its wind tunnel time for 2023 terminated. Rivals Mercedes and Ferrari demanded harsh punishment and sanctions from the FIA for misbehaviour, and Red Bull found itself the target of criticism as wild rumours suggested it could be over the budget by as much as $10 million. Red Bull team boss Christian Horner has fiercely refuted accusations of any fraud though, and maintains that his organisation's books are in order. Red Bull, however, steadfastly maintains that it stands by its March submission, which sources claim was several $1 million under the limit, despite what its biggest rivals were stating. By the media if he was anxious about Wednesday's outcome, Red Bull team boss Christian Horner responded, "No, I'm absolutely confident in our submission. It's been through a process. It went in March, in terms of being signed off fully by our auditors, who are obviously one of the big three, and we believe that we are comfortably within the cap. So the FIA are following the process. We expect hopefully and potentially this week to hear not just us, but all of the teams the outcome of that process." While Red Bull does not know what the FIA will say on Wednesday, he acknowledges that the governing body bears a great deal of responsibility for the thoroughness of its investigations and responses. These are a brand new set of regulations that are highly complicated and that apply to companies of different structures, different formulations, and of course regulations, he said. There's always different interpretations to those regulations, so in the first year, it will be very interesting to see how that is applied. We've seen clarifications, even since the submissions were made, that apply to last year. So it's always going to be a process of evolution. It's an enormous topic for the FIA to get their arms around, particularly when you look at the scale of the teams in the pit lane, many of which belong to even bigger conglomerates and organizations. When asked if the most recent explanations of what should and should not be covered by the cost cap had meant Red Bull was still below the cap, Horner responded, "It is significantly below. With the clarifications, we should be even further below." Horner was furious over the weekend's references made by other teams to Red Bull, even going so far as to call their remarks defamatory. He made it clear that Red Bull would consider taking legal action if certain remarks were not taken back. This is still the company's position, although other parties have not yet responded. Horner added, "What I said absolutely stands. We will consider all our options, and it's totally unacceptable to make a completely unfounded allegation. And on the basis of what knowledge? Where is the source of information? This is a confidential submission between the team and the FIA. I have no idea of the compliance of any of our rivals, so where does that information supposedly come from?" He added, "But let's complete the process. We have not been informed that we are in breach of the regulations, so let's get to the end of the process and understand where we are." Verstappen wasn't fond of the gossip either. He made sure to express his displeasure with other teams' demeanour. Verstappen was asked by the media if it was upsetting for his team to be the subject of the gossip. He responded, "I know where it comes from, so..." When asked if he was certain there wouldn't be a problem, the Dutchman responded, "Well, from what I hear from the team, yes." Of course, then other teams start to talk about it while they have no information, and I find that a bit silly. Just keep your mouth shut. But what exactly did those teams say that could upset Max Verstappen and Christian Horner so much? Well, let's find out. Even though Christian Horner had announced earlier that his team's request for the 2021 cap was below the approximate $145 million maximum, Wolff claimed that went against what the paddock's senior figures had discovered. It's funny Christian says that because it's been weeks and months they're being investigated, so maybe he doesn't need to speak to his CFO, Wolff told the media. As a matter of fact, all of us have been investigated diligently, and as far as we understand, there's a team in minor breach, which is more procedural, and another team that is fundamentally massively over, and that is still being looked after. So it's an open secret in the paddock. The notion of a cost cap breach, according to Wolff, should not be dismissed because his team had to forego car performance and lose personnel to stay inside the established limit. Therefore, he claimed that any mild treatment of overspending would be a kick in the teeth. "It's heavyweight. It's massively heavyweight," he said about the matter. "We're using used parts. We're not running what we want to run. We are not developing what we could be developing. We've made more than 40 people redundant that are dearly missed in our organization, and it's a huge, mammoth project to make the cap. I don't know how many tens of millions we had to restructure and reprocess in order to be below the cap. And if someone has not been doing that or pushing the boundaries, every million you don't spend is a massive disadvantage." The FIA has announced that compliance certificates will be granted, and while the current issue concerns spending throughout the 2021 season, Wolff thinks the ramifications are significant. "The crucial part is that if you've been over in 2021, then you've been over in 22, he said. That means you've an advantage in 23. If it's true that they've, meaning Red Bull, homologated the lightweight chassis this year, they may use it next year. So it's really a cascade of events that can be influential in all of the 3 championships. And so, Wolff insists that the FIA must act harshly if a team is found to have overspent. The cost cap is probably the most important evolution of regulations in order to keep a level playing field, said Wolff, and to allow teams that haven't got the full budget to catch up and to put the ceiling onto the spending of the top teams. So it is of huge importance for a demonstration that these regulations are policed. And I have no reason to believe otherwise. The FIA, particularly Mohammed, have shown a pretty robust stance on enforcing all kinds of regulations. So I think if we're talking now about something big, he will show the same integrity and leadership that he's done before. And Toto Wolff wasn't the only one that was displeased with the news. Title rivals Ferrari also had their say about it, as team president Mattia Binotto acknowledged that it was not ideal for the title race for 2021 to still be up for discussion at this time. He insisted that the significance of overspending could not be ignored. "It's definitely a shame that we're talking about it in October of the following season, because at this point, apart from implications on last year's championship, there are also implications for the current one," he told Sky Italia. "Let's wait until Wednesday before making a judgment, but whatever amount we are talking about, it's important to understand that even if it is 4 million, which falls into the category of what is considered a minor breach, 4 million is not minor. For us, 4 million represents the development parts for an entire season. 4 million means 70 people in the technical department who can come up with and produce solutions that could be worth up to half a second a lap. So even if we're looking at something considered a minor breach, it's not peanuts." He added, "We're talking of half a second, and that advantage is carried forward into subsequent seasons, because while it began in 2021, it still gives a competitive advantage in 2022 and 2023, so this is clearly an important matter. It puts the credibility in general at stake. I hope that everyone has dealt with this exercise correctly, because otherwise it will be a very big problem to manage." And so the scandal continues. We'll have to wait and see what the FIA have found and investigated to know exactly what went down. Do you think Red Bull overspent and broke the budget cap? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated with the latest F1 news.